Welcome back to another episode of Make Growth Happen. I'm your host, Garth Fasano, president and co-founder at Rainmaker, and I'm joined by Connor Gross, a franchise consultant. Connor, you want to give us a quick intro?
Yeah, so I'm Connor Gross. I own a couple franchises, or own several franchises in two different brands, one in home services and one in the waste industry, and also a franchise consultant. So I help people that are looking to buy a franchise but might not know where to start, or may just want the help and advice of someone that's done it several times before. So that is what I do.
Thanks for joining us again, Connor. We've had you on the pod a couple times, and we've talked about a handful of different areas in franchising, in growth. Today, we're going to dive all into how do you grow within an existing territory. So, for example, you're a franchise owner. Maybe you've just bought a franchise. Maybe you've owned one for 10 years, and you're trying to grow that location, that store, that territory. What are the tips and tricks and strategies to do that? So stay tuned and listen in for this. You're not going to want to miss it. So the first thing that, here at Rainmaker, we work with a variety of small businesses and franchises on their sales and growth strategy. And I really try to think about this into three areas. How are you getting leads? How are you converting and selling those leads? And then, how are you delivering a great service and making sure you're capturing referrals or reviews in that process to continue to feed the cycle? Because this really isn't a linear process. It's not 1, 2, 3. It kind of flows together at each point. Now, Connor, you've been a franchise owner and operator and seen a lot of these businesses from the periphery. So, does that sound right? How else might you want to think about it? Or is there any spot you think we should start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it plays into the third, kind of component that you laid out. But that basically just talking about delivery of the services themselves and making sure that they're delivered with enough gross profit. And I guess how that, like, to close the loop here, you have to be able to deliver a service with enough gross profit to cover the marketing spend, and that's part of what keeps this flywheel going. So I think we're on the right track, but just wanted to highlight that.
You just called out, I think my favorite part about this entire thing. It's your customer acquisition cost to your lifetime value. And I think what's really interesting is a lot of the winners in a particular space, in a market, in a business type, in an industry, they're the ones that can actually afford to spend more on CAC, the customer acquisition cost. They don't actually have to spend more on CAC, but if you have a solid business model, then you can spend more on CAC because you have the margin, so you can actually win out against many of your competitors. So that is probably the fundamental, as you get down to the numbers in our last conversation, I kept tying it to, hey, look at the numbers in the FDD. This is the same thing. You got to look at the numbers, CAC to LTV ratios. If you've got a higher LTV, lower cost profile for the business, you can spend more to acquire customers, and you can ultimately grow your business at a rate faster than the market. So super, super important. You've also had some really good comments in one of our other podcasts. You said, hey, when you're getting into a franchise, run your model like every single lead you get is going to come through digital. And then once you're in there, boots on the ground, do everything you can so that you have to buy no leads. And I thought that was such a really insightful comment, because it's a good way to conservatively plan the business, but also a really good sort of inspiration for the owner operator to be boots on the ground, getting out there, getting leads, and getting the word out. So I think that's really important. When we look across a lot of the types of businesses that we work with, a lot of their leads do come from digital sources today. And what we've seen as the home services marketplace has been, I would say challenged from a digital side. Google updates their algorithm. There are new advertising types introduced. It becomes kind of the folks that are fully dependent on that as their lead source. They've seen sort of a lot of ups and downs over the last 12 months, whereas folks that have had stronger referral or organic sources have really weathered some of those transitions. How have your businesses done? How have you seen this play out for maybe clients or things like that too?
Yeah, well, and I guess the most relevant business experience that I have to this conversation is my first franchise, because the other one is B2B, and obviously that's completely different on all fronts. And so, in a B2C business, at least, my experience was on the front. Part of what was really tricky about the first year is, again, like I talked about, what I tell people is imagine as if you're not going to get any leads that are paid from paid sources. What would you have to do to go drive business, but model it as if you're going to pay for every lead. Really, just what I was finding and what people typically are going to find is that in that first year, you're going to be more dependent on paid lead sources than at any point during the tenure of your ownership, most likely. And so it makes sense if you're not making a lot of money, right? Because you're paying for every customer that you're going to get. The idea is if you survive and advance through that period and you're doing what you need to do, to connect the dots on, that virtuous cycle of eventually getting customers that you don't have to pay for, that's where hopefully margins are going to improve and revenue is going to increase, more broadly. But, yeah, I mean, that first year, which is first year was like that 2019, 2020 period. Obviously that was 100% new customers pretty much. And then this past year, 80% of our revenue came from existing customers with, not a whole lot of a marketing spend. So that's the life cycle of a business. And you have to have the guts and the capital to push through that, survive and advance to get to that point.
Oh, so many follow-up things to talk about on this. I think you're totally right. Like early on in the business, you are going to be incredibly dependent on digital lead sources. So Google PPC, Meta, all those types of things. And what I typically encourage folks to do is, especially for a new franchise, is to really lean into PPC leads, maybe local service ads as well, and really think about how you are dominating that search page. Like, where does your brand pop up when someone hits Google and says XYZ service near me? Like, where do you show up? You need to audit that page and you need to own it. You need to work with your PPC vendor, or if that's you, you need to make sure your ads are showing up on the top. You need to consider adding LSA as an ad. That's a Google local service ad. And because then it just gives you more real estate at the top of that page. And then you got to look at how your SEO and your AI optimization is doing as well, so that you are really commanding a lot of that page, because that is going to be a primary source of leads. And I think you said the next best thing too is like, you got to hustle so that you can sort of wean yourself off that dependency, because things change. Competition comes in, competition does better, or the algorithms change. Like, I know a lot of businesses that were relatively disrupted by the AI search results, and they say things that are like completely wrong about their business, but nonetheless it says it. And so, that's what potential customers and leads are going to see. And so really trying to figure out how to manage that, I think, is really, really important. This is a really hot topic of how those digital leads come in. Maybe what did you do, or what were some strategies you took to sort of wean off of digital as quickly as possible? Maybe this was 5 years ago, and so maybe it's not as relevant now. But what were some things you might have thought about? And I can also give some examples that I've seen in the market too.
Yeah, and like something that I did that I hated in the moment, but in retrospect was probably the right move, is even lead sources that I hate, and you can bleep this out if you want, but I'm not a fan of Home Advisor, Angie's List, whatever they're called now.
The
Not a fan of those
aggregators.
leads.
Oh,
Yeah, the aggregators. So the aggregators, the portals and everything, like I just found them to be just like not good leads. They were the leads were overly price sensitive and everything. And I hated the fact that I had to, it's all about speed to leads. So, I had no peace in my life because I was waiting for a vibrate to look down and it was, 8:30 on a Saturday morning and I have to go call this lead because otherwise it was, $70 down the drain or whatever. I digress. Anyway, the point
no,
is, yeah.
hang on. Aggregators are a really important topic. We've done a whole bunch of tests on these. I would put them in the digital category, and I think they create
Yes.
so much anxiety for business owners, exactly like what you said. Like, hey, we got to turn it off every night, turn it on every morning, because we don't want to buy the leads overnight because the speed to lead is slower. And then, people get a lead at all hours and they feel compelled that they have to respond to it really quickly. So those are really, really hard for small business owners to manage. And what we found is that when you're sort of doing those manually like that, we've had conversion rates as low as 2% on those, which would put a CAC for some of our client types like up at $750. Crazy. The trick to getting those types of sources to work is that you have to build in APIs so the data automatically pushes into a CRM where they're added to the next list, and then so they get a call really, really quickly. The next important thing is you got to treat these lead sources differently. You said another thing and they're like, oh, they're way more price sensitive. You actually have to be prepared to discount quicker to leads from like Thumbtack, Bark, Angie's, Home Advisor, and Google LSA, even though Google LSA isn't an aggregator, it's just less qualified leads. So the sales team, whoever's doing that for you, needs to know what that lead source is so that they can treat it differently. And so I would say, like in businesses where there is recurring revenue, those can be better. Where there's sort of a one-time charge, that can be a little bit harder because you know you're going to have to discount more quickly because they're still generally just shopping around, which fundamentally means they're higher up in the funnel than like a PPC lead. So I don't know if that all makes sense, but very important lead source needs to be treated with respect and optimized for it to work well.
Completely agree. And kind of where I was going with that is it's like I hated that my experience using those, but in retrospect, it was a good. I'm glad that I did early on because what I needed was activity. And it's like once you generate enough activity, even if it's not, even if they're not the best customer, not the ideal customer, it helped us gain some traction early on. And how I view it now is like you earn the right to be selective with your lead sources. You are not born with that right out of the gate. Right out of the gate, you need revenue coming in the door. And after you've optimized everything, after you have, you've built a brand and you've built a stream of customers and referral sources, that's when you are in a position to say, I don't like that lead source. I'm going to repurpose, these resources elsewhere because you also don't have all of the information early
Right.
on.
What I would say is the lead sources I like are the ones that have the highest CAC to LTV ratio, or should be said the other way, an LTV to CAC ratio. Like that's
Yes.
how it should work out.
But
But
the other thing
early on,
is like, early on, you're not always going to have that information. And
exactly.
the quickest way, in my opinion, to get clarity on what your ideal lead sources are going to be is to spend more money and be prepared to just part ways with money, knowing that, you're not always going to know that.
So
Yeah.
follow-up question on that too is we've talked a lot about franchising and a lot of these numbers are in the FDDs, like how much you need to spend. Does that really account accurately for exactly what we're just talking about? Like upfront, you're going to have to spend way more on digital. So like, I think a lot of people look at the required advertising spend in the FDDs as like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. But I imagine actually early on, it's actually significantly higher and then may taper off as other lead sources come into play.
Yeah, if you see a required advertising spend, it should be nowhere near what you actually plan to spend. Like you should to the point that you're not even concerned about it. So like that's one thing, because you don't want to be trapped in a position where the required ad spend is higher than what you care to spend, because then obviously that's an expense. But yeah, if you're trying to nickel and dime your business on marketing and stuff because you're afraid of not making money, to me that just means that it's not a business with an average ticket, and a margin that's going to make sense. But to the point about like marketing right after you open, I mean it's kind of like like restaurants. They spend an outsized amounts of marketing right after they open, before they open, because they know that that's what it's going to take to get momentum. And you have to bring the same principle to a mobile service business. And so it's both to get traction going, building the brand right off the bat, but it's also it's also to account for the fact that you're going to spend some money that you wish you hadn't, just to find out that is not the lane where you want to invest your marketing resources moving forward. All of that to say, you got to be ready to spend money, and there's no hack to that.
Yep, because your customer acquisition cost is going to be way higher than what it would be for an established business. So just that's the way the cookie crumbles. It has to
And
happen early
yeah,
on.
and trajectory month over month in those early months is really what you have to focus on, because it is very, very normal. I mean, almost always. I don't know that I've ever heard of somebody that says that their CAC was lower than they expected right off the bat. Like I don't think I have ever heard that from anybody. But yeah, it's like if it's getting better, significantly, that's where you can have some comfort around. Okay, this is working, and we just need to keep doing this.
Yeah. So we should transition to this sort of the second part of this process or this cycle, which is like, how do you actually convert customers? So getting leads, sort of the first thing, what are those lead sources? And we could spend so much time talking about what are the strategies by particular business type to sort of wean off of digital. But at a high level, get involved in your market, whatever's the relevant sources, like get to know those people. to convert more customers. And this is where something that Rainmaker has specialized in for basically 15 years, especially servicing franchises. But speed to lead is a really important component of this. The next thing that I would say is really important is having your pricing and packaging dialed. And I've seen, as we've helped a lot of businesses sell, they don't sell in a way that's familiar, simple, easy for customers to understand. So it takes a lot more work to get them to say yes, even though they like the service, they want it, they filled out a lead form, but they can't say yes because they don't understand how the pricing and packaging works, or they can't compare it to another option. So making your pricing and packaging really simple, especially if you're selling over the phone or remotely, I think that's incredibly important. And by the way, like I mystery shop things all the time. So like I mystery shopped this company recently. It is a franchise, Lawn Doctor, but I need their help first of all. So it wasn't just a straight mystery shop. I will probably become a customer, but my feedback for them is that they came to my house. They did this. They didn't tell me when they were coming. They just knocked on the door. They surprised my wife, and she was like, "What the heck is this?" And they filled out this sheet of paper, and that was about 72 hours ago. I am still waiting for the call back. Like I'm ready to buy. They haven't called me yet. I haven't been asked for the sale yet. So that's a really interesting one of like pricing, packaging. How are you putting all this together? And you got to ask for the sale. So I would really encourage people to think a lot about what the sales process is and how do they optimize it? How do they make it simpler? More and more customers are getting ready to buy remotely. Like if I had been able to click and buy this on the website and watch a video about what they were going to do for me, and maybe if they had a customized video of my property from the walkthrough that they did, like I don't think there's any way I wouldn't book this. But right now I just got to go figure out how do I actually buy it? I don't know.
Quick story about that concept. I when I got started, so my first franchise, does window cleaning and stuff throughout the year. They do holiday lighting, and during the wintertime. And so my first year, it was the first holiday. I just started to sell holiday lighting. It was like August or September or whatever. And the first quote that I had done, or the first like lead that I got, basically, I told the lady like, "Hey, I'll be out at your house, this time, whatever." She texted me back and was like, "Well, can't you just like get a picture, over the internet? Like, do you really need to come out?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess I could do that." And so I sketched it out for her, like, she was prodding me to go work remotely, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll." So I did it, sent her a quote, and she said, "Okay, thanks. How do I pay?" And I sent her the link or whatever. Like she was prodding me, like I want to buy remotely. I want to buy remotely and stuff. So anyway, that was the first lighting job that I sold. A year and a half later, or not, yeah, a year and a half later, she was the first lighting job that I sold. A year and a half later, hired her as the general manager of that business, and she's worked with me for about 4 years.
That's such a good
So
story. But I think, customers are at all sorts of different places in willingness to buy remotely, and it depends on the type of sale that it is. But, there are some things that people just want to click and buy and move on. And there are other things where they really do want to talk to a person. And this is going to vary in each individual business. So I think what's just more and more important is that if people are buying $100,000 cars with the click of a button on the internet without going to a dealer, which is happening now, or $30,000 cars, like that's a huge ticket item that people don't need to go see, touch, talk to somebody. In fact, it's easy. Like I remember people pre-ordering Teslas while I was in an MBA class, and like at the end of the class, we were like, "Oh, I pre-ordered one because it opened during the while we were in class," and like 5 people said, "Oh, I pre-ordered one," and it was like, wow, that was easy. And it was like almost a point of pride for them. And so I think businesses need to think about how do we make it easy for our customers. And even if we don't have the pricing exactly right at the beginning, like now you've acquired that customer instead of them going to a competitor, and you have an opportunity to get LTV to CAC in the right spot over time. So
And it's
I
so easy for us to, as business owners, to overemphasize our own relevance in our customers' lives. Because to us, like our service is 100% of their life, because that's the interfacing that we have with them. But in the reality, we're like a very small percentage of their life. So that not everybody wants us to come and put on the show and sing and dance for them when we give them a
yep,
quote. Like that's just not what everybody wants. They want click here, come do the service,
yep.
let it be seamless, and we're good to go.
Yeah, and using really, this is dangerous. I'm going to say generally what we see across our client base is services that are on the outside of the home, like lawn doctor, where there's not somebody coming into the home. This is generally home services. There's a lot more willingness to buy without talking to somebody, or the need for that human interaction is a lot lower. Once they're coming into the home, it's a much more personal experience, and we see a lot higher need to really talk through details, concerns. How does this work? This is way more personal if someone's coming into the home. So I think that is an important thing to consider. But that being said, there are still folks that purchase in-home services like completely over text, or are getting ready more and more so to do that remotely, so or without communicating directly with a real human. So I think that's an important thing for folks to be thinking about. But that's probably getting ahead of where a lot of small business operators actually are today. I think the really important thing is speed to lead, getting to those leads quickly. The sort of intent to buy decays pretty rapidly over time, and then the other thing is really having your pricing and packaging refined so it's very simple to communicate effectively what your offer is, the value proposition, and accept and like close, book, sign, seal, delivered the sale.
Absolutely. Completely agree.
Oh, then so our third topic is a little bit more operational, but delivering a really good service so that you can sort of create a virtuous cycle so that you get more reviews, you get more referrals, and so that feeds your lead machine. And we have a lot of clients that are amazing at getting reviews. We have one client that got 30 five-star Google reviews in 30 days. And he did it by, when he was providing the service and his team was providing the service, they just really took the time to meet the purchaser, the buyer, the customer, spent the time with them, and ultimately asked them for the review, made sure that they felt so good about what the service was. And once they were sort of on that emotional high, his way of doing it was so natural, but it said, hey, like, it seems like this has really helped you and your family. I'd like to help more people. If you think other people would benefit, can you give me a review? It was something really well worded like that, where it wasn't like about him or his business, but it was more like there are other people like you that need this service. Can you please help them? And obviously there are better and worse ways to articulate that, but I thought it was a really, really nice way of getting reviews. And he got 30 five-star Google reviews in 30 days. And that was when he was starting his territory out.
That's incredible. And he would not have gotten that level of results with one of the automated, review follow-up systems.
No.
And I'm not saying that those are a bad thing because I think that they're better than nothing. But it's kind of like what we were talking about, how you earn the right to be selective with your lead sources. Like you kind of earn the right to utilize that in the beginning. Like just reach out to the customers. It's probably when I
Oh,
probably leave reviews for like 20% of the automated requests I get. I leave reviews for 100% of the personal requests that I get for those,
I, I completely agree with you, by the way. You got to ask for it. You can't rely on the automated system. We actually do provide that service for a lot of our customers, and like in terms of automating the review process. But, it's going to work with, you know, much better outcomes by personally asking for it. What I would look at is the automated systems are a way to, you know, remind somebody that you personally asked for, and just to make it so easy for them that there's no way for them to forget, or essentially.
So you're saying like what you guys do, it's not like mutually exclusive. You still have to like have a personalized aspect to it in order for the automated system to just enhance results. Is that fair?
Exactly, because if you do
Makes
the
sense.
automated system, like, I think your response rate is, I don't actually know what the response rate is, but I imagine it's like less than 10%. Whereas if you personally ask for a review, I think the response rate, probably not quite 100%. You're a really good guy there, Connor, but I bet it's like 50 plus, 80 plus percent. But then if you can also just make it so easy. So, like, if someone personally asked you for a review and then you got busy and forgot about it, but the next day or 3 hours later, you get a text with the link to write the review, like, you're probably going to do that. Like, because you're, oh, yeah, I totally slipped my mind. Let me just click this link. So, like, I would say make it personal, but also make it as easy as possible.
Absolutely. And so then the next piece of it is what do you do with those reviews? Can you like talk through the best practices there?
Oh, yeah. What we see is best in class is using those reviews as sort of a leverage point in a lot of your collateral. And you're going to see this in email copy from businesses where they're like, look at all of our reviews, in landing pages. So, if someone's looking for a service, we can use this like lawn doctor or, lawn care example. Like I live in Colorado. We've got a very, clay-based soil and it's hot. You have to water your lawn. I don't really know what I'm doing with that. And so if I search for something about a Colorado lawn, like how do I take care of it? I want to go to a landing page that shows me particular experience with those search terms. And then I want to see reviews from people like me in my area. Don't show me a review from somebody in like New York. That's effectively not helpful because it's a totally different situation. It's a totally different problem. And so, you want to use those reviews in your collateral to help win over customers. And I'm seeing that in sort of leading nurture sequences, landing pages, and on websites, pulling in those reviews. Social proof is so important for leads that don't immediately buy. And it's not like we're trying to be spammy and over the top with this, but when people are shopping around and higher up in your funnel, and they fill out a lead form, you have a good conversation with them, or you're putting them through your sales process. If they don't buy yet, social proof is a really great way to help them see customers like them that have benefited from your service, solve the problem that they're looking for. So reviews are a really fantastic way to do that. I think another thing that's happening more and more is that, especially on higher ticket items, more and more of sort of younger generations are reading reviews and researching a business online before making a purchase. And so and I think that what this needs to be is hyper localized for your business. If your competition has 500 reviews and you have five, like, you got some work to do. And think about what are these big thresholds that people are going to look at to say, oh, wow, this business is totally in a different category. Like, you want your business to be in that totally different category. So I think quantity and the obviously you got to be at or above the star rating of your nearest competitors too.
It's so true, and I think that some of it is generational too, because in prior generations, the social proof of seeing something, like hearing something from a friend versus reading something on the internet, was very, very different. So like yeah, there's a big difference between them having a friend recommend your business versus them reading a review on Google. My generation, like, our interfacing with our friends is on the internet, is digital. And so we don't have the same layer of bifurcation between the social proof that comes from reading a review or seeing something positive on social media versus seeing something from a friend of ours, because chances are if it's something from a friend of ours, that might also be on the internet. So it's like social proof just is evolving both generationally and just like the market share of your prospective customers that are going to think that way just as the world changes.
Absolutely. Like, when I pick a restaurant to go eat at, if I'm in a town that I don't know, I'm looking at the stars. Like, what is the highest number of stars, the type of food that I want? Like, that's how purchasing decisions are made. And so, and then you also got to look at the number of reviews to make sure that there's like, that's a social proof factor, the star rating and the number of reviews. And so what we do a lot with our clients is we actually help them do an audit. And I mentioned this earlier, like, understand what your digital presence looks like. And because someone that researches XYZ service near me, they're going to see Google LSA leads first. Then I'm trying to remember this off the top of my head. And I think it's sponsored, and then it's the Google Map, so Google My Business, and there are sponsored ads inside of that. Sometimes there's going to be an AI response, and then there's going to be the SEO responses. And so your star rating on Google is going to show up in that GMB section. So that's like 2 or 3 on the search results. And so, and because that's a highlight, not all of the businesses, especially if you're in a bigger city, are going to show up. The ones with the highest number of stars and the ones that are paying for it are going to show up. And so by getting more reviews, it's just going to give you that better, like, literally digital footprint on the web so that you get more leads, and it will lower your customer acquisition cost.
Just thinking about how you can better monetize social proof, for lack of a better term, is there are there best practices, whether it's automation or outreach or whatever, that you guys have found that just help franchisees or help business owners get more referrals in general?
More referrals or reviews? I mean, we talked a little bit about the automation on reviews. What I think is really important for referrals, I think automation is a really important part of referrals if the business is not doing it. I mean, again, same kind of goes back to the same thing we were talking about. The best way to do this is to have a human touch, to ask after you've provided a good service. Maybe, we do have some clients that their office manager after a service gives a call and says, "Hey, you just had your first service with XYZ. Just wanted to check and see how everything is going." And they're making sure that the customer is satisfied. They're making sure that, they've got everything that they need because they're a new customer and it was their service team that just, went out to the site. And then that's also a great time to ask for a referral. Like, hey, do you have any neighbors that might benefit from that? And maybe even a little bit further on after they've had a little bit more experience, like you have to earn the right to ask for that social proof. I think another thing that people should be automating that as well. Like, and I do think that when you ask for a referral, you really have to give something of value in exchange for it. Like I think you need to offer a discount on the next service, or offer the next service for free, or if you don't have recurring revenue, you should offer a gift card. And a lot of business owners I think might be resistant to that, but people referrals, people are putting their social capital at risk with a referral. And so you actually do need to compensate them for that, because there is a real risk to what they are doing and a real value to the business as well. And if you know your customer acquisition cost, you can very easily quantify how much you would be willing to pay for a referral lead. And so you would just do it every time. And so, like, that's the way I think people are starting to operate their businesses more and more, even at the small business and franchise scale.
Absolutely. And I think it's, there's a difference in how you approach referrals, whether the business is proactive or reactive from the customer standpoint. Meaning, if it's a proactive service and it's like on demand, the customer decides they want the thing, they get it. That's where it's easier to ask for referrals and get them on the demand. Whereas if it's a reactive service, like a restoration company, it's like, hey, yeah, keep us in mind when your neighbor has, 9 feet of water in their basement, that kind of thing. That's where I think people can get burnt out really, really easily on the referral game, because it's harder to see. You don't get the immediate gratification of a referral. You basically have to promote yourself, ask for the referral over time, just so that you're front of mind when someone knows someone who's in that situation in the time of need.
A great example where it's not going to be an instant, the ask drives a results, like in the restoration business. That totally makes sense. Yeah. But I think if there's a strategy there, it would make a lot of sense. Like every 6 or 12 months, send them a postcard or a magnet so it gets on the fridge. And then that way you're top of mind when something happens. And you've earned that right by providing a good service.
Yep. And this is also where drip campaigns are worth their weight in gold. It's
Yeah.
the best ROI you'll ever see is having a solid drip campaign.
Yeah, we do 50 for unconverted leads. We do a 52-week text message nurture sequence and a 5-year email nurture sequence now. And so we've seen like the home services digital landscape get more and more competitive. And we've implemented those types of strategies and absolutely using things that we talked about, like social proof with reviews, and that's had a really good impact. But obviously, it can take 5 years to see the fruits of that work too. um, Anything else you want to add, Connor? I think this was an awesome discussion on sort of 3 big areas to think through in growing a territory, a franchise, or a small business that you're actively in and operating.
I guess the only thing that I would add is just, I guess for people out there that are frustrated with marketing right now and with lead flow and the cost of leads and everything, I would just say, like, you're not crazy. Like, just, affirm the fact that it's a challenge that everybody's having. And, as things have gotten more competitive. And so if you're feeling that, I'm not saying, to roll over and don't do anything. There's certainly things that you might need to change. But, it's an overall sentiment right now, at least that I'm hearing. And, from what I see in the franchise space, I do think that it's something that's going to have long-term standing effects on the industry, because, it's showing how you have to be, as a franchise system, you have to be providing more value than just setting up a marketing system, because it's not 2016 anymore. It's not, the days of $5 leads are over. And, you have to, you have to be a little bit more, just a little more scrappy in how you go about this kind of stuff, and in identifying those high leverage, low hanging fruit, low cost ways that you can drive leads and drive revenue.
It's a great call out, and I think something everybody's been on the digital marketing high, and we got to figure out, and sort of reinvent the businesses and lead gen strategy. So super important point. Thanks so much, Connor. Great having you on the show.
Thanks,
we'll put your info in the show notes too if anyone wants to reach out or has questions.
Sounds great.
Thanks so much.